Hey everyone, it's Charlie in Westeros here, and I'm finally back in Canada. My European study tour is now over, and I can finally resume my semi-normal life of putting more effort into my Game of Thrones video reviews. Now, before I get started on my review for episode 9 of season 3, which is entitled The Reigns of Castamere, I think it is important to state that this episode is it likely came as a huge shock to most of the show viewers who have not, of course, read the books. But I will say, even for me, the show did an amazing, amazing job with this recent episode, which I happen to have watched in the middle of a plane ride from Warsaw to London. And needless to say, the people sitting around me were looking at me very weirdly because I was quite literally cringing and even kind of shaking during the last scene. However, I will address this last scene in this review, so before I dig too deep, let me start from the beginning of this episode. So, the episode starts off with Robb and his mother, Catelyn, discussing a planned impending assault on Casterly Rock, which is the Lannisters' home castle. Robb also reveals that he wants his mother's advice because he didn't follow her thoughts when she told him not to release Theon, who turned out to betray him. So it kind of shows that there's a reconciliation between him and his mother. And also, just an aside, but there was also another hint in this scene, as well as throughout the episode, actually, as to who is keeping Theon prisoner. But no more on that. So, by the end of the scene, Robb resolves to go and attack Casterly Rock, but first they must go to, of course, solidify his planned allegiance with the Lord Walder Frey in order to get more men. Now, along with a snippet of Grey Wolf upon his arrival to the Crossings, which is the Frey's home castle, Robb Stark basically he takes part in a mini religious or welcoming ceremony in which Lord Frey, of course, welcomes Robb and his family as honored guests in the Light of the Seven. And in response, Robb apologizes for having slighted Lord Frey by not marrying his daughter. Now, the greetings and welcoming ceremony is heavily important, I think, to take note of because, well, for one very big reason, and that reason is, of course, religion. So far, we have gotten indications as to how very important religious belief is to the many characters in the show, and in many ways, the many religious or religions of Westeros is where the characters of Game of Thrones, draw their morality and value system. For example, a few weeks back, we had a judgment duel between Sandor Clegane and the leader of the Men Without Banners, and when Sandor won, he was, of course, allowed to go free because that was his judgment trial. The same thing happened, of course, with Tyrion in Season 1 after he was captured by Lysa Tully, who, even in spite of her disdain for Tyrion, still let him go because he won his judgment duel, which was done in the name of, the Seven Gods. So, as such, in this case, by offering protection to his guests in the name of the gods, Lord Frey, he not only tarnishes his own name and valor through his acts of murder later on, because of course he's lying in his vow to the gods, but he does so to an even greater extent by doing it during a wedding ceremony, an even more significantly holy event. And I really want to talk about the consequences of Walder Frey's actions in more detail, but I will really save it for the end of this episode later on, when things get crazy. So, in the next scene, we have Daenerys, her men, and her new ally, the sellsword Daario Naharis, prepare to take over Yunkai by sneaking some men into a back door, basically, and open the front gates of the city so Daenerys' army can enter easily. After some debate, Daenerys agrees to go through with this plan, and it seems that finally we get a bit of an understanding between Jorah Mormont and Barristan Selmy, which is very nice. But there's not much else to say about the scene specifically, so moving it along, we then get a scene with Sam and Jilly. Sam reveals that he knows a secret way to get through the Great Wall in order to go back to Castle Black. I think the most telling thing about this scene is that wildlings, especially Gilly, are very ignorant to the outside world. Considering she is super impressed by both Sam's abilities to, read and write, and, of course, by the fact that she's finally seeing the wall and she's, not dead like many wildlings have claimed would happen to them if they looked upon the wall. So after this, we get a scene with Arya and Sandor Clegane, who are planning to sneak into the wedding festivities at the crossings, where she'll be able to reach her mother and brother. They basically plan to hijack a cart with goods going to the feast, and when Clegane tries to kill the man carrying the items, Arya succeeds in stopping him. And of course, this again gives us even more of an indication that maybe the Hound does have a heart somewhere deep down. And I think in many ways it kind of echoes back to that scene a few weeks ago when Jaime and Brienne let the man in a cart pass by them without killing him, and he went and brought back some soldiers and chopped off Jaime's hands, or one of his hands anyway. But that's a whole other story. So moving along, there is another short scene thereafter, again with Arya and Sandor, who are very close by to the crossings, and this one, to be honest, is very interesting because we finally see Arya call out Sandor for being afraid of fire and why he is afraid of fire, which is, of course, something that happened to him in his childhood with his older brother. And in this scene, she vows to put a sword through his skull, which honestly is pretty ballsy of her, but to be honest, I would rather see her do that to somebody else, like maybe Joffrey. Normally, I would think a scene like this is a sign of foreshadowing things to come, but somehow I hope and think that things would, maybe improve between her and Sandor, since I think he could be more of help to her than anything else, but that's that. After that, we have a scene with Bran, Rickon, and the Reeds, and they're getting ready to camp in an abandoned watchtower. Nearby, Jon Snow and the wildlings are preparing to assault a farm with horses. Jon, of course, shows some strong dislike to the idea, but he can't really do much to stop the wildlings, so he hits his sword against a rock to warn the farmer, who then tries to escape. Again, later on, a storm has broken out, and Hodor in the nearby tower is shouting really loudly, and it's going to warn the wildlings that they're there. But somehow, Bran manages to temporarily warg into Hodor's body and make him stop yelling, which is really cool because that means he can basically go into the bodies of other human beings, which doesn't seem like something that happens very often in this series, according to Jojen Reed later on. Concomitantly, though, the wildlings have caught the farmer and are about to execute him when the warg, Orell, says that Jon should do the deed to prove that he is not a traitor. Of course, he is unable to do so and is revealed to be a traitor. The wildlings are then ordered to kill Jon, meanwhile, and I gotta say, I'm surprised that the two direwolves didn't just go and attack right away, since all of a sudden we see Bran and Rickon's direwolves appear at that sign, and they're kind of watching things going on, while Jojen Reed, tells Bran to warg right away because, he thinks he can do it on command. He's ready for that. And so the direwolves really only attack once Bran wargs into one of them, I guess, and of course helps Jon fight off the wildlings. Then Jon successfully kills Orell and he flees. The scene is pretty crazy because I think it both marks one of the few times characters are somewhat reunited after such a long time apart, and especially in the case of the Starks. But it is more interesting, I think, because now Jon will have to go back to the Night's Watch, and I wonder what will happen to him there. Will his brothers welcome him with open arms after his very long absence? What will he tell him? Is he going to tell him that he was a spy? But what he did to the fellow man of the Night's Watch that he killed under the pretenses of becoming a spy? There are so many questions left, and we will really have to see how Jon Snow deals with them. In the end, this seems to mark the end of the Jon and Ygritte showmance, at least for now anyway. And if anything, I think this scene heightens the fact that they really are star-crossed lovers, and perhaps weren't really meant to be. Nevertheless, I don't think it is the last we will see of John and Ygritte. So, moving it along, we then get a short scene where Jorah, Grey Worm, and Daario sneak into the city and fight some soldiers. It's a very short scene, but more and more soldiers seem to keep coming, and it looks as though they are pretty much screwed. I'm going to skip ahead and mention the next Daenerys scene, where it turns out that Jorah, Grey Worm, and Daario are actually successful in fighting the Yunkai, and they bring her a banner of the city as proof of their victory. Now, two things I want to say about this scene is, first, it looks like Dany is developing a crush on Daario, and it doesn't seem to please Jorah very much. Second, now that Dany has not only conquered 2 cities, but she has, 3 growing dragons and a huge army at her disposal. So, when, at a time she might have been able to get away with being unnoticed by the other factions, who are, of course, vying for control of the Seven Kingdoms, there is now no way that the noises she's been making will not be, taken into consideration at this point. It can only be stated that the Lords of Westeros, if they are smart, will start to pay close attention to what is going on in the East and with her. And I can only predict that this might mark a shift of focusing on events away from the western part of the continent and more towards things in the East. At least I hope. Next, we have the wedding scene again between Edmure and Walder Frey's daughter, who turns out to be actually quite beautiful, and of course Edmure looks pleased. The wedding is going pretty well. The couple say their religious holy vows. And of course that makes Lord Frey's impending murder even more disturbing, again, as I said earlier. There's then another quick scene with Bran, Rickon, and co., and they are basically discussing where to go at this point. Finally, Bran reaches the decision that he wants Rickon to go with Osha to a place called Last Hearth, which is a stronghold of one of the Stark's bannermen, while Bran decides that he and the Reeds are going to go north, beyond the wall, to find this three-eyed raven creature. The scene ends on a rather sad note, where 2 more Stark siblings are yet again divided. But again, something that Bran says in the scene, which is, I think, semi-prophetic, is that, and again, this is prophetic in the sense of things to come in this episode, which is, quote, "If something happens to us, a.k.a. Robb and Bran, then you, Rickon, is heir to Winterfell." And of course, we know that by saying this, he's referring to some unfortunate things that happened to Robb by the end of the episode. Anyway, now I want to focus finally on the last crazy and wild scene of this episode, something that's really gotten people talking a lot from this weekend. That is the feast of the event that will be known as the Red Wedding. So everything is happy and going fine. The Blackfish, Tully, he leaves to the feast to go pee. Now, just a note about that. Of course, it's not a sign that he is part of the betrayal, but rather that he is, I think, going to leave as one of the survivors of this massacre. I think that his survival also gives the viewers a sign of where enduring resistance to the Lannisters might reside, at least from the Riverlands anyway, assuming, of course, that he hasn't been captured. I do think, however, Edmure is less fortunate, since he is in his marriage bed and will either, be killed or kept a prisoner, or more likely kept a prisoner anyway, because he has, of course, just married Rosalind Frey. But then again, who knows how much, we actually know, we kind of know how much Walder Frey cares about wedding vows. Keeping it moving, the bedding ceremony starts, and Edmure and his wife are carried off. Celebrations continue. However, Catelyn Stark gets really suspicious. She notices the doors to the hall are shut, and the minstrels start to play the song known as the Rains of Castamere, which is a song that was referred to in the previous episode by Cersei, who tells her father about how, or tells, Marjorie Tyrell about how about a previous wealthy family who dared, I guess, stand up to the Lannisters and how they were all killed by Tywin. And of course, this song was mentioned in that episode as a foreshadowing of things to come in this episode, which of course bears the name of that song. So Arya and the Hound have finally arrived at the castle, but they're barred, or at the keep, but they're barred entry. Although Arya does sneak in. Finally, during Walder Frey's final speech, Catelyn notices that Bruce Bolton is wearing a metal armor, or a chainmail vest, and that's when she knows that something's up. She strikes him right away, and suddenly the massacre occurs. Lady Talisa is stabbed in the belly, where of course she's been pregnant. Robb and his Northmen are struck down by crossbows, and Walder Frey looks on with delight. Outside, Arya, witnesses the relaxing Northman soldiers being massacred, and she sees Grey Wind moaning in his cage. Now, another side, I normally don't compare the show to the book too much, but I really wish they did do one thing here that the book did, and that was to make Grey Wind much more resistant. The Stark direwolves are almost, they're magical in a sense. I truly feel like in the books, Grey Wind, he showed immense resistance in going to the Freys for this wedding because he knew what was coming. He knew that the Freys had ill intentions towards Robb. And even in the books, again, during this massacre, Grey Wind heavily resisted and even killed a number of Frey soldiers before being, shot down by crossbow arrows. I did feel like his death in the show was just too sad and kind of weak. I wish there had been some resistance there on Grey Wind's part, at least to give the viewer some small satisfaction from the scene, I guess. Luckily, however, Arya, she gets dragged away from the scene by Sandor Clegane, so she is of course still safe. Luckily, the scene cuts back to the last moments of this massacre. Robb, he's crawling to his wife. Lord Frey orders the ceasing to the killings, and again, it's just so sad to see him look into his dead wife's eyes. And then suddenly Catelyn runs to grab Lord Walder Frey's wife, and she threatens to kill his wife in exchange for her son's life. She's pleading with Walder Frey, but he doesn't care, and so basically Lord Bolton, who is of course revealed as a traitor, kills Robb. And so as a result, she kills Walder Frey's wife by slicing her neck. And then she stands there, just, emotionally dead, until a soldier just arrives and slices her neck too. And that's the end of that episode. Now, my first thoughts after watching this is that Walder Frey and Roose Bolton and Tywin Lannister, they must die after this. I want them all to die in the most painful, the most horrible ways possible. Like I said earlier, religion seems very significant in the series. Magic, of course, is reappearing in this world, and some powers seem very much linked to religion. The faith of the Seven reigns in Westeros, predominantly anyway, and Walder Frey, evidently under the orders of Tywin, he's pretty much just spat in the face of this main religion by murdering an entire army under the holy oath of hospitality and during the sanctity of a marriage. So I personally think they have not only damned themselves in the eyes of the Northmen, but in fact they've damned themselves in the eyes of many, many people in the Seven Kingdoms. Many might think it is just as bad as what happened to Ned Stark in the first season, and in some ways it is, but remember that in the eyes of many, Ned Stark was seen as a traitor, even, of course, if it was wrongly so. However, Robb was murdered in a completely dishonest fashion under deceitful circumstances, and I think that truly speaks to the nature of the show. Much like his father, Robb showed himself to be an honorable person by trying to apologize to Walder Frey, yet look what that led him. Many of you know that Robb is one of my favorite characters, but in this tale, it seems like honesty and good intentions will not always mean we'll have a happy ending, unfortunately. And it's also partially why I am Team Dany. But on another note, we now have to address what happens next in the scene of events. We have just witnessed the disappearance of Robb and his army quite literally overnight. Certainly there's still going to be fighting force at River Run, presumably anyway, but the only Northmen that remained basically all went north after Robb had one of his bannermen executed, and they are undoubtedly going to have to find some new form of leadership. However, with Robb dead and his two younger brothers also presumed to be dead, the only Stark that now really remains to, I guess, act as the heir is Sansa Stark, since she is the presumed heiress and now, I guess, Princess of Winterfell. And of course, she's now married to Tyrion Lannister. So it remains to be seen how willing most Northmen will be to follow what they might perceive to be a puppet of the Lannisters, pretty much. But this, this does show that the Lannisters are now in a position to really grasp complete control of the Seven Kingdoms, since Stannis is still hiding away at Dragonstone, and Daenerys is, for the moment, going relatively unnoticed. However, this is Game of Thrones, and the show would be just incomplete without a bunch of surprises. So expect many, many, many more next episode. Before finishing this review, I do want to say that the actors truly did an amazing job with the Red Wedding scene. It was just amazingly horrifying, and I think it really did the book justice, or they actually did the book justice. Next week is the last episode for this season of Game of Thrones, and I will have a lot to say for then, because, like I said, there will be many, many new and crazy shakeups that will occur, and I'll probably even be making two videos, video reviews for that one. One with book spoilers, and the other one without, of course, for everyone's enjoyment. So, yeah, great episode. 10 out of 10 in my books. That's all for now. Please feel free to leave a comment, thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and subscribe, of course, if you like. So, yeah, take care for now, guys. Bye.